Video games are an interesting medium. There's a recommended way to interact with them, the way intended by the developers, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's the way you have to. You can't really say that for any other form of entertainment. Reading a book, well, doesn't really make sense to do it anyway, but from start to finish. Mostly anyway. I guess like textbooks, they don't have to be start to finish, but you're still just reading them. Movies, you start from the start, you watch it through. Same with TV series. You can't really choose to consume these mediums in any way except for the intended way. Video games, on the other hand, you could play the way the devs intended, following the story beats, beating all the levels, getting to the end of the game and saying you've beaten it. Or you could do something totally different. Stick around if you want to listen to me talk about some unconventional ways that people play video games. So, I'm going to start out this video by talking about some of the unconventional ways me and my friends used to play video games when we were kids. Because who doesn't want to sit around and reminisce about the good old times, hey? Funnily enough, almost all of these came from the mind of my childhood best friend Carl. He has a knack for coming up with these weird and wonderful ways to get more enjoyment out of games. When we were maybe 13 or 14, we spent a lot of time playing Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, which of course is a game that you do pretty much whatever the hell you want in. We spent very little time actually making any progress in the game's missions though. We would always play in that janky 2-player mode, you know the one. Both characters are on the screen at the same time and you can't get too far away from each other without the game creating some sort of invisible barrier. If you're familiar with the game, you probably know about Mount Chiliad, the tallest mountain in the game. You're probably also aware that there's a lot of fun cheats to mess around with in this game. So Carl came up with this idea where we get ourselves a Sanchez, those noisy little dirt bikes? Then we chuck on the cheat for an instant 5-star wanted level. And then we try to make our way to the top of Mount Chiliad just to jump off that little ramp at the peak. That might not sound that interesting. You might think it would keep us entertained for like 5 minutes at most, but you'd be wrong. This was no easy feat. When you had 5 stars, you get attacked by an onslaught of helicopters, tanks, and police cars all at once. The funny thing about this though is because the path to get to the top of Mount Chiliad is so thin and windy, often there was no ideal place for the game to spawn in the vehicles. So, frequently you'd be riding up the mountain and a tank or a police car would just spawn on the path above you and make a beeline straight for you. This always led to many occasions where a tank would essentially fall from the sky and just crush us. We laughed way too hard whenever that happened, it was just so ridiculously funny. This simple little game kept us entertained for hours. Every time we'd get squished by a falling vehicle or taken out by a police helicopter, we'd just respawn back at Grove Street and have to journey our way back to the mountain. So it's not exactly a quick back-to-back attempt. One day, we did eventually make it all the way to the top of the mountain, and we rode our bike at full speed off that tiny little ramp. Man, what a glorious moment. We felt so accomplished, we'd finally done it. Of course, our prize for making it all the way to the top of the mountain and riding off that ramp, a very long fall with a very sudden, very painful stop right at the bottom. Not much of a prize when you think about it. Before we move on, I just really quickly want to mention this kind of weird glitch I came across when I was recording footage for this. It was kind of cinematic and really cool. I'll show you. Yeah, happened because of the emulator, I guess. I do own the game, do own the console, don't own a capture card, so I had to kind of figure out an emulator for this. And yeah, we got some pretty weird effects. Also, this game is not for kids. I can't believe I used to play it when I was like 11, but it's really fun. And it still holds up. Another of our alternative playstyles had a pretty meager payoff. Now that I think about it, when Carl and I were wee lads, probably around 9 or 10, we were playing Donkey Kong 64 multiplayer. It's actually super fun for all those people who never got to try it back in the day. I haven't thought about this in so long. It was a great addition to a mainly single player game. Man, they don't make games like they used to. Might have got a bit sidetracked there, sorry. So, as I was saying, we were playing the multiplayer mode, having a great time, when we decided we'd try out the battle arena. It's this tiny circular arena with no boundary around it, so it's super easy to fall off. The goal was simple, destroy more enemies than your opponent in the time limit. We did this for a few rounds and it was a good time, but then, during one match, I was running around a little too erratically and I just launched myself right off the edge, plummeting to my doom. That wasn't super unusual, but then Carl decided that he was just going to leap off the edge after me and yelled, I'm coming! As we both plummeted into the black abyss. Our tiny child brains thought this was the funniest thing in the world. We were absolutely cackling with laughter. Actually, scratch that tiny child brain part. My absolutely humongous adult-sized brain still thinks that shit is hilarious. So anyway, that became our new way to play. This was no longer a competition. We were a team. If one person fell off the edge, the other would leap after them and yell, "I'm coming!" Obviously, there was no benefit to this whatsoever. We just thought it was really funny. My mother, on the other hand, did not see the humour in this. Did I mention that we devised this game at 4:30 in the morning after having stayed up all night playing video games? We were shouting and laughing so much, having the time of our lives. It was seriously the best night ever. And then suddenly we heard a loud bang. And then stamping feet coming up the hallway. Oops. Mum opened the door, bleary-eyed and annoyed at having been woken up just one too many times that night by our antics. She just looked me in the eyes and grumbled, "No more sleepovers ever again. Go to bed right now." Then she went back to bed to try and get a little more sleep. Safe to say, that killed the laughter, but we still enjoyed the game we dubbed Crazy Battle Arena so many more times throughout the years. And of course, Mum didn't mean it. Carl was allowed to sleep over again in a few weeks, as if the whole thing never happened. Sorry, Mum. Love ya. Me and Carl still yell to each other, "I'm coming!" Just randomly sometimes. It's still funny. In a similar vein, another game that we used to actively make harder for ourselves just for a laugh was Bomberman 64. I'm not really sure how popular the multiplayer for this was back in the day, but me and my friends really loved it. We used to play this all the time until I really stupidly traded my copy of Bomberman 64 for a copy of Dark Rift. Dark Rift is not a good game. Man, the amount of games that I sold for way too cheap or traded for really bad games when I was a kid is upsetting. When we eventually got sick of playing Bomberman 64's multiplayer the intended way, we started playing team battles and purposely running down the timer. Because after a certain length of time, sudden death mode would kick in. When that happens, the water starts rising from below, so you have to rush around quickly and try and win before being engulfed in the water, which of course would make you lose instantly. Normally, sudden death is seen as a bit of a punishment for not winning quickly enough, but to us, this was a way to make the gameplay way more intense and way more entertaining. Because this was not the intended way to play, it was also a struggle just to run down the clock as the computer characters would be chasing us around and trying to win the match. But we didn't want to start fighting back, not until the water started rising anyway. It's only a slight change, but it really changed the whole feel of the multiplayer mode. By the way, if you've never played multiplayer Bomberman 64, get some friends together and give it a go sometime. I guarantee it'll lead to some hilarious moments. But also a lot of arguments when someone inevitably blows up their teammate by accident. Some games are more catered to playing in your own unique way than others. There's only so many ways you can change Bomberman 64 or Donkey Kong 64. You might not think it, but the James Bond games were a goldmine for playing in your own unique way when we were kids. I had Goldeneye for the Nintendo 64, and many weekends were spent playing multiplayer for just hours and hours with Carl and my other good friend at the time, Jason. Everybody who's played Goldeneye remembers the Golden Gun, right? That elusive, solid gold pistol. It could take anyone out with just a single bullet. We made our own custom game mode revolving around that golden gun, of course. We called it Golden Gun Chasey. A very unique name, I know. Basically, one person would be it, like in Chasey, or Tag if you're an American. Whoever is it gets the golden gun, and the other players get no weapons. We would just run around the map trying to avoid the player who's it and see how long we could survive. This was enough to keep us entertained for hours, running around the levels just screaming if we turned around a corner and saw the person with the golden gun standing there. The other game mode that we made for Goldeneye back in the day was probably even dumber, and it also involved the golden gun. This one we used to call the duck game, and the duck game was always played in the library. There's a section of the level with a narrow walkway that's above the main area. We'd have one person standing in the main area of the room with the golden gun, and then the other two of us would stand at the entrance to the elevated walkway. Without warning, we would just run as fast as we could to the other side while the person with the golden gun was in free aim mode just trying to shoot us. It was kind of like our own version of those shooting gallery games, or Duck Hunt, hence the name duck game. This one was always fun for a quick laugh, but it really didn't have the staying power of Golden Gun Chasey. Since two of us were basically just running side to side, it wasn't that engaging, I guess. Sometimes, if I was really lucky, my mum would take me and my mates to Blockbuster or Video Easy and rent a Nintendo 64 game for us for the weekend. It was often a gamble whether the game you picked would be any good or complete garbage. One weekend, I picked out a game with this big Viking woman on the cover. She was swinging a fish at another person. I was like, oh hell yeah, that's what I'm getting. I didn't have any friends over this weekend to help me go over this important decision, so I just went with my gut. I'm getting the game with the fish. I got home, popped in the game, and loaded up Virtual Chess 64. My weekend was ruined. Another weekend, things went in a much more positive direction. Carl was over for the weekend, so Mum took us to Blockbuster, and after way too long searching around, we settled on James Bond. The World Is Not Enough. More like the appreciation for that game is not enough, am I right? Yeah, okay, that was bad. But the game is not bad. You know what made The World's Not Enough so good? You can have computer-controlled bots in multiplayer. That is something that Goldeneye was sorely missing. The first weekend that we rented The World's Not Enough, me and my friends set the bots to the highest difficulty and we played around in this level called Merchant. This level had a central hub area with 2 elevators, and off to one side was this big room with a winding staircase. We spent hours upon hours just hanging around in that lobby area, going up and down the elevators, up and down, up and down. If we opened the elevator door and a bot was standing there, we'd scream and quickly shut the door and move on to a different floor. Or, if they were the ones in the elevator, we'd just quickly rush off to the staircase and try and flee. If the bots caught up with us, or if we weren't quick enough, we would always get taken out. The bots are just way too good on the hardest difficulty. It was really hard to survive an encounter with them, which is what made it so funny. Years later, we lucked out again at Blockbuster when we decided to rent James Bond, Agent Under Fire. This game had a gadget called the Q-Claw, a grappling hook that you could use as much as you like to zoom around the map at high speeds. Of course, we ended up just having grappling hook duels where we were only allowed to shoot each other as we flew past with grappling hooks. This made it really hard to accurately shoot each other, but god damn it was funny watching people fly around at high speed with a grappling hook just shooting wildly.
Stupid logo.
So in a kind of similar vein to our World Is Not Enough escapades, my dad, who I didn't live with, he had a copy of Conkers Bad Fur Day, and one day he decided I was finally old enough to play it. So, of course, I asked him if I could borrow it and take it back to Mum's for a bit, which he really kindly let me do. Conkers Bad Fur Day is definitely most known for its single player campaign, but do not overlook the multiplayer modes. They are some of the most fun you can have on a Nintendo 64 if you ask me. There was this one mode in particular me and my friends really liked. It was called Raptor. This mode was kind of like a modified version of Capture the Flag, except one of the teams, the player, was the flag. There were 2 teams, a team of raptors and a team of cavemen. The cavemen are hungry, and they have this gigantic frying pan just ready to cook up a nice meal. But they're missing a very important ingredient, food. Food of any kind. So, they decided they're going to steal the raptors' eggs from their nest and cook up a tasty treat. The raptors are not a fan of this plan, and they too have a problem. They have a hungry baby that just needs feeding. They, funny enough, also need some food. So their plan, feed the baby some tasty cavemen. This also keeps their eggs from being eaten in the process, so you know, 2 birds, 1 stone. The raptors are much stronger than the cavemen, obviously, and faster too. But the cavemen do have weapons. In an ideal game setup, you might have equal teams of raptors and cavemen, or maybe even a couple more cavemen since the raptors are kind of OP, but not us. Oh no, you might be able to guess where this is going. We used to set up games where we were the only cavemen. No computer-controlled teammates, and then the raptor team would have as many raptors as they were allowed, and we'd set them to the hardest difficulty. This, of course, led to us trying to sneak over to the raptor's nest to get the eggs, being spotted by a bunch of overpowered raptors, and then running for our lives, screaming and just laughing our asses off. Inevitably, we'd get taken out in one hit and dragged back to the hungry jaws of the baby dinosaur. Good times. Good times. For some reason, a lot of our unconventional ways of playing games involve being complete pacifists, just running away from any sort of danger. I don't know what that says about us. I think the best genre for playing games in your own unique way is RPGs, or more specifically, MMORPGs. My first taste with one of these games was Runescape at the tender age of 12. Way back in 2005 when I was introduced to Runescape, or more specifically at the time, Runescape 2. It didn't take long before I was totally hooked. Honestly, hooked is probably an understatement, more like hopelessly addicted. My debilitating RuneScape addiction might be a story for another day though. Let's try to keep this video positive, huh? I played RuneScape with my friends every day that I was allowed after school. I'd rush home and beg mum to let me use a computer. Officially the rule was I could only use the internet every second day, because dial-up, and I think mum could see I was kind of getting obsessed. She was somewhat lenient though, so sometimes I'd get to use the internet on days I wasn't supposed to. Cheers mum. There were so many ways to play the game, so many skills to train, quests to complete, players to dominate in the wildy, or you could just hang out and chat in the Falador garden. One of my most memorable experiences with the game as a kid though was when Carl and I came up with our own adventure. You see, there's an area up north called the Wilderness, and this is the only place in the game where you're vulnerable to attacks from other players. This was a free-for-all PvP zone. We came up with the idea of essentially just living in the wilderness. We would venture far to the north with nothing at all, no armors, no weapon, and we'd have to fend for ourselves. All we brought with us was a pickaxe for mining, a hammer for smithing, and a lobster pot for fishing some food. There were iron and coal rocks in a few remote locations, so we'd first have to venture out there to mine as much as we could before setting off somewhere else far, far away to the smelter to make our own ores into bars. Then, we'd set off to the anvil to make ourselves some crappy weapons and armor. This was a really slow process, as every step meant journeying a long distance to the next location. All the while we had to be on the lookout for other players who would happily jump us and take us out in a few hits, since we were so weak at the time. After getting our weapons and armor sorted to make us feel a little bit safer, we would then head all the way east to the river where we could fish for lobsters, something that we desperately needed to stay alive. The problem was that right near the fishing spots there was a lesser demon spawn, so we had to walk around very carefully, trying our best to avoid being attacked by the demons, who were far, far more powerful than us. There really was no end goal for this game of ours. I think we tried fighting the demons a few times after all our preparation, but we were pretty low levels, so it usually ended in our death. And then of course we'd lose all our items and have to start all over again. Regardless of the seemingly pointless nature of playing like this, we had an amazing time playing in our own unique way. Sometimes, game developers would add extra game modes to their games after seeing how people have been playing their games in unique ways. Sticking with RuneScape, there's an official game mode called Iron Man mode. Players are unable to trade with other players or participate in some group activities. It essentially turns the game into a single player game. The game mode was added in October of 2014, 13 years into the lifespan of RuneScape. Before Iron Man mode was an official mode though, there were already a number of people playing in this way, just as a fun personal challenge. I'm sure there were others before him, but when I think of the unofficial Iron Man mode days, I think of Bodhi. Bodhi made a series on his YouTube channel called One Man Army, which was basically Iron Man, but there were some extra rules and extra challenges in place. Back then, people playing in this way usually called it DIY, do it yourself. The first episode of this series was uploaded on June of 2014, and it was a huge success in terms of RuneScape videos. Currently it's sitting at close to 400,000 views. Now, it could be a coincidence, but there's a chance it wasn't. This series blew up in the RuneScape community, and not even 5 months later, it turned into an official game mode. I do want to point out that I'm aware that Iron Man is not something specific to RuneScape. It had been done in many games for many years before this. A lot of people date it back to the early days of the first Diablo game, but I'm not delving that deep today. Maybe in a future video we can dig deep into the history of Iron Man challenges in video games. What do you think? MMOs like RuneScape, World of Warcraft, Elder Scrolls Online, Final Fantasy XIV? Any of those, they are just ripe for playing in your own unique way. Lately, I've been spending way too much time on YouTube watching RuneScape series about chunkmen accounts. I just can't get enough, it's so good. So basically you're locked in this one small chunk of the map until you complete everything there is to do in that chunk, and then you roll another random adjacent chunk and you repeat the process. This leads to strange and very unusual, very inefficient grinds that can last hundreds or even thousands of hours. There are also skillers who do no combat as a self-inflicted restriction. 807 accounts who only do combat, named after your max total level if you max out all your combat stats and nothing else. There's region locked accounts who can't leave a certain town or region of the game. Ultimate Iron Men who can't use a bank, so they're permanently restricted to their 28 inventory slots forever. Or, if you're as crazy as one of my favourite RuneScape YouTubers Settled, you could play Nightmare Mode. If you take any damage whatsoever, your account is permanently locked and you have to start all over again with a new account. It feels like the sky's the limit when it comes to creative freedom in MMOs. Obviously, I'm only talking about stuff I know, which is why it's all centered around RuneScape. It's the only MMO I've played for more than a few hours, and it was kind of my life's obsession for like 10 years. But I'm certain there are other people out there having the same creative fun with any of the other countless MMOs that are available today. Playing games in your own unique way does not have to be this big, elaborate thing with tons of rules and regulations, though. It can be whatever you want. It's kind of the point. I really have no way to segue into this nicely, but I need to talk about it. And I think it's probably the only time I'm ever going to get a chance to mention this in a video. So, when I was a teenager, I was obsessed with Guitar Hero. I played it all the time, and I was pretty good. Not as good as people today though. Look up any modern Guitar Hero YouTube video, these people are insane. But, like, compared to a lot of my friends at the time, I was pretty good. I could beat like 90% of the songs on Expert. Yeah, I know, flex harder, right? One afternoon, I was getting tired of playing the same songs over and over, but I wanted to keep on playing. I didn't know about mods or Clone Hero or Frets on Fire, nothing like that. So I made my own modifications. I decided that I would play with only my feet. Needless to say, I was not very good. I did manage to beat a few songs on easy though, using only my feet, and that did feel like a hell of an accomplishment. A stupid one, but an accomplishment nonetheless. Self-imposed challenges can also go the other way with rhythm instruments though. Rather than challenging yourself in a rhythm game, some people have taken it upon themselves to complete other types of games using rhythm game instruments, such as the Guitar Hero controller, Guitar Hero drum kit, or even the Donkey Konga bongos. I'm not sure who it started with, to be honest. I did a bit of digging around, but there are just so many videos and posts online these days about people beating games with a Guitar Hero controller. But I think one of the most impressive ones I've ever heard of is a person who goes by the name of Mezzanine. They have beaten every Dark Souls game without taking a single hit using just a Guitar Hero controller. As someone who can't even beat Dark Souls with a standard controller, that's friggin' wild to me. Bearsley is another streamer who's taking on similar challenges. He's beaten the Dark Souls games using all three devices I mentioned earlier, the Guitar Hero guitar, and drums, and the DK bongos. There are a ton of other unique gameplay styles I could delve into in this video, such as speedrunning, randomizers, and nuzlocks, just to name a few. But those are kind of moving away from the point of this video a little, I think. They're more like community agreed upon alternative ways to play games, with strict rules in place, rather than the dumb little self-imposed challenges that I've been talking about so far. If there's enough interest though, I could definitely start working on a sequel to this video. Tons more topics I could delve into. Just say the word and I'll get typing. The older I get, the less I find myself playing games in these inefficient ways. It's kind of sad to think about it that way, but it's kind of how my brain works. I'm no longer in my 20s, as much as it pains me to say that. It's true. I have a full-time job, a family, a fiance I love so much, way too many pets, a band I play in, and this YouTube channel, as new as it is. What I'm trying to get at is, these days, my time's limited. When I was a kid, I could just get up in the morning, sit down and play video games for like 10 hours or more if I wanted. I mean, sometimes. I don't think my parents liked it very much when I did, but I digress. I had all the time in the world. Nothing felt inefficient or like a waste of time. Life was just about having fun. And sometimes, that meant jumping to our death from the top of Mount Chiliad, or in a battle arena, surrounded by murky black abyss, yelling, "I'm coming!" Now, if I'm sitting down to play a game, I subconsciously feel the need to always be achieving something. Whether that's ticking off a game from my backlog so there's one less game that I've bought that I've never finished haunting my dreams, or leveling up my Runescape character in the most efficient way, I don't know when this switch flipped in my brain, and I could no longer just enjoy playing a game for what it is. A fun time, doing something I love. But damn, It makes me sad that that feeling's gone. But does it have to be? I don't think so. I think it'd take time and a shift in perspective, but I do think it's doable. I'm sure I'm not the only one out there with this kind of mindset when it comes to gaming, or any other hobbies these days. So, if you're like me, and you're missing the joy of just messing around in a game just for the sake of fun, I urge you, give it another go. Boot up one of your favourite childhood games, and just explore. Enjoy being in the game's world. Don't worry about beating the game, don't worry about trying to get every unlockable, just take it all in. Look around, enjoy the music, enjoy the gameplay, and just try to relax a little. Because really, that's what gaming should be about. Just relaxing, enjoying yourself, taking your mind off of the infinite stress of the world and just having fun, even if it's only an hour after a long day of work. Just have some fun. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to call Carl and see if he wants to play some Golden Gun Chasey or Crazy Battle Arena.